As I've said many times on this channel, the Occam's razor principle is often the common sense approach to investigating. The simplest solution is normally correct, but not always. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then chances are it's a duck. Unless it's a small goose or a man in a duck suit. As you can see, there are always exceptions to the rule. So as we go through today's case, I want you to bear in mind what you believe is the most obvious solution when the evidence is taken into account. With that said, we're going to a story from Jefferson County, Missouri, and to a tale that starts primarily in the 1980s but comes to a head in the 1990s. This is the case of Patricia Stallings, and this is Murder of Crows. To the eastern side of the state of Missouri, we find the county of Jefferson. Now, the county was organized in 1818 and was named in honor of the former President Thomas Jefferson. By the time of our story, in the late 80s and early 1990s, the population of the county was between 150 and 160,000 people. A largely suburban region, it is a Republican stronghold, if that means anything to anybody, and contains cities like Festus, DeSoto, and Hillsborough, the latter being the county seat. In terms of its less broadcast facts, this includes that the county has a state high of 30% of people smoking or otherwise using tobacco, and that Jefferson County led the entire US in methamphetamine production, peaking in the mid-2000s. Well done, Jefferson. Well done. But in the mid-1980s, Jefferson County, and in particular the city of Arnold, was home to Patricia Stallings, who was born in the mid-1960s. She had had a difficult start to life. As a young woman, she had spent years living in poverty and also went through periods of homelessness. During this time, she also had a baby out of wedlock, whom she'd had to surrender to the state for financial reasons largely, as she could barely afford to care for herself, let alone the additional strain of a child. Clearly it was a very difficult time for the young lady, but by the time she was getting into her early to mid-20s, things seemed to have changed for the better for the young woman. In the mid-80s, Patricia, known to all of those within her circles as Patty, and living in the city of Arnold, she began working as a convenience store clerk. And with stable employment came greater stability generally. Around 1985, she noticed a man who would come into the store perhaps a little more often than he really needed to. And eventually this man plucked up the courage to ask her out. This man was a printer named David Stallings, and the two began dating in 1986, with the couple eventually getting married in 1988. Patty's life would be completed when she fell pregnant and gave birth to the couple's first son, Ryan, in April of 1989. And she later reflected on this period of her life around the birth of Ryan, with her saying much later on, "That truly was the happiest time of my life. Everything was perfect. Everything. A new house, a new baby. I mean, what could be wrong?" The couple were happy, and there were no significant issues between any members of the family. But things changed when Ryan was only about 3 months old in July of 1989. Something seemed to be seriously amiss with the young baby. He was regularly vomiting and seemed to have difficulty breathing. She rushed him to Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital, where he was immediately placed into pediatric intensive care. It was an extremely anxious time for Patty and David Stallings. Things significantly shifted after some early tests on the baby boy. Noting a high level of what they believed to be ethylene glycol in the baby's blood. And following a simple logic, physicians suspected that the boy had been poisoned with antifreeze. Quite understandably, this led to the police bringing pressure to bear on the only two people who could conceivably have administered poison to the helpless baby, that being Patty and David. And the couple were separated for questioning by the police, and both were asked if there were any problems at home, if there were arguments at all, until they were ultimately told that either they or their spouse had poisoned their baby. For the next 5 weeks, Patty and David were only allowed to visit their extremely unwell child under strict supervision. But during their 6th visit, Patty was, by some strange quirk, allowed to be alone with Ryan for just a few minutes, and during that time she fed him from a bottle. After this visit, Ryan Stallings' condition got drastically worse, and the police, believing that Patty had poisoned Ryan, arrested her for assault. And this theory was seemingly substantiated when the police found antifreeze in the Stallings' home. Accused of being a baby killer, Patty was forbidden from seeing Ryan even while he was drawing his last breath. On September the 7th, Ryan Stallings tragically died from his peculiar illness. Stallings had been arrested on assault charges a couple of days before, on September the 5th, and she was not allowed to attend the funeral. And after Ryan died, the charges were revised to first-degree murder. Now, at the time of her arrest, Patty was pregnant with her and David's 2nd child. And in February of 1990, she gave birth to another boy. And the couple named this boy David Jr., and he came to be referred to as DJ. Given what had happened to Ryan, the baby was immediately placed in foster care, this time with absolutely no contact allowed with his parents. So when the baby began exhibiting the same symptoms as Ryan had shown, despite having no contact with his parents, it was obviously time to investigate a bit more and dig a little bit deeper into what was going on. Doctors eventually diagnosed DJ with methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA, which is a rare genetic disorder in which the body cannot break down proteins and fats properly. As part of the condition, the body also accumulates propionic acid. And this is a compound that is chemically similar to ethylene glycol. And anyone not intimately familiar with propionic acid's makeup could very easily mistake it for the toxic chemical. Now, thankfully, DJ survived, and appropriate treatment was put in place, and after leaving hospital was promptly returned to foster care. But the incident obviously inspired Patty Stallings' defence team to therefore dig deeper into Ryan's death. If one of the Stallings children had this genetic disorder, it was very possible that Ryan had this disorder as well. Had the doctors misinterpreted propionic acid found in Ryan's blood as being ethylene glycol? There was every chance of that. Unfortunately, the judge declined to allow the defence to present this theory in court, with the logic being that at the time there was not enough definitive evidence that Rhys Stallings had suffered from MMA. Again, the logic extrapolated further being his brother's diagnosis was not a confirmation of his own. Though why the information could not be provided as potentially relevant background, I don't know, since it was almost certainly the reason why Rhys Stallings had become so gravely ill. So the defence were left with no option but to speculate that Ryan had died of unspecified natural causes, which the prosecution were not just dismissive of, but insultingly so, with Jefferson County Prosecutor George McElroy saying, "You might as well speculate that some little man from Mars came down and shot him full of some mysterious bacteria." What a fucking prick. But I digress, quite clearly. Now, even though Patty Stallings' friends and family rallied around her and insisted that she was innocent, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder in 1991. At the age of just 25, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It would actually be a popular TV show that would eventually turn the tide in Patty's favour. The Stallings case was featured on the Unsolved Mysteries television programme. And purely by chance, a biochemist named William Sly of St. Louis University saw that particular episode. And he agreed to test Ryan's blood, and he in turn gave it to James Shoemaker, who was director of the metabolic screening lab at St. Louis University. And Shoemaker immediately confirmed that Ryan had MMA. However, ethylene glycol is not a human metabolite, even in cases of MMA. And Stallings went to trial with no explanation linking MMA to ethylene glycol. Much later, after the case had been featured on Unsolved Mysteries and the episode aired, Shoemaker asked prosecutor George McElroy for the methods that had been used to measure the ethylene glycol in Ryan's blood. And McElroy duly supplied Shoemaker with that information. When the method was used on blood from both Ryan and DJ, it was seen that propionic acid, which is produced in MMA, caused a result that careless observers might mistake for ethylene glycol, so similar were the two compounds. Shoemaker then sent samples of propionate spiked blood to several laboratories as a test, and these laboratories tested it with the same methods that had been used in the Stallings case. And some of these laboratories came to the incorrect conclusion that the blood reflected ethylene glycol poisoning. At Sly's and Shoemaker's request, Piero Rinaldo of Yale University also looked at the case and concluded that Ryan had died of MMA. And his testimony helped to convince McElroy that Ryan may in fact not have been poisoned. In July of 1991, Patty was released from jail pending a new trial, and at this point she was placed on house arrest. But in September of 1991, prosecutors apologized to Patty Stallings and dropped the case against her completely. In following this up, Patty won a 7-figure settlement against Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital and also against the laboratory that had tested Ryan's blood. She later said that the perception of her case may have been influenced by the case of Paula Sims, which had unfolded at around the same time. And in that particular case, a mother had been tried and convicted of killing her 2 daughters. And there was considerable public outcry over these particular murders, so tensions in the country were obviously running high. In 1994, McElroy ran for re-election as the Jefferson County prosecutor, and Patty, quite understandably, donated $10,000 to his opponent, Robert Wilkins, and Wilkins duly won the race. When McElroy offered to show Wilkins his information on the Stallings case, Patty found out and asked a court to have her arrest record expunged. Some of the information was ordered to be expunged, but a judge said that Missouri law mandated that prosecutors confidentially maintain some of the information related to felony arrests. And the Stallings case, quite rightly, continues to be cited as an extreme case of a metabolic disorder that can mimic a criminal act. There was no happy ending for the Stallings, though. Patricia and her husband David divorced in the 1990s. David Jr., known to all around them as DJ, passed away in 2013 at the age of just 23, while David Sr. passed away in 2019 at the age of 57 after a long illness. Patty kept a low profile after the media sideshow that her life had spiraled into, and there has been little information about her since she successfully sued those responsible for misdiagnosing her beloved son, Ryan. The case remains one of the many cases of miscarriages of justice in the US, and this particular case resulted in the death of Ryan Stallings at less than a year old, while his brother DJ died at the young age of 23. The shadow of the case would always hang over the family like an unfair albatross around their necks. And Occam's razor definitely got this one wrong. This video is dedicated to the entire Stallings family, who were struck with a genetic anomaly that happened to mimic a known poisoning technique. And that was the case of a baby who died, with all signs pointing to that baby having been poisoned. But while the Stallings' second son showed the exact same symptoms, even with no contact with the parents, and that child was confirmed to have a rare genetic defect, the prosecutor and judge refused to allow this information to be used, thereby almost immediately introducing what would have been a completely understandable level of reasonable doubt. If this happened, it would have meant that Patty would probably not have been found guilty, and without that information, it was really a losing battle to try to win the case. So really, in this case, Ryan's murderer was really his own DNA and his own bodily systems causing a biochemical reaction that poisoned the defenseless infant. It was difficult to predict, but when Ryan's brother showed the same symptoms, even Occam and his razor would probably have said at that point, maybe it runs in the family. But Patty was still dragged over the coals and subjected to an ordeal that she did not deserve. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please like, share and subscribe. Please and thank you. And with that said, I'm Steve. This soppy bugger is Samson. And we will see you when we see you.